My ex-wife left me at a deserted highway rest stop as a prank. Let's see how long it takes. I should have known something was off from the way she chewed her gum. It was loud, wet, rhythmic, like a clock ticking on the dashboard, tick, 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 and I could feel my blood pulsing in my temples, synced up to the sound. We hadn't spoken for maybe an hour, maybe longer, not a word. Just the hum of the engine, the whisper of wind sneaking in through the cracked window, and her chewing like she didn't have a care in the world. She always chewed gum when she was bored or trying not to say something. We were somewhere on the stretch between nowhere and farther from nowhere. I think it was past Santa Rosa, maybe near Vaughn, one of those parts of New Mexico where the world flattens out and the sky swells too big for the land. Everything was beige, sun faded. The kind of place where even time felt sunburned and tired. She had one hand draped over the wheel like she was posing for a road trip photo, even though no one was taking pictures. The other was scrolling through a playlist she'd made the night before, all synth pop and vaguely upbeat indie tracks that didn't fit the landscape or the mood or the marriage. I looked at her profile, the sharp line of her nose, the dark hair tied back with a leopard print scrunchie she probably thought was ironic. And I had this moment, this aching flicker of memory of being 25 and watching her dance barefoot in our first apartment to some ridiculous pop song, singing into a whisk, laughing so hard she cried. That girl was gone. I didn't know when she left. Maybe around the same time I did. I asked, maybe because I needed to break the silence, maybe because I was tired of thinking about anything else. Do you ever think we should have had kids? I said it quietly, like tossing a pebble into a lake, hoping the ripple would be gentle, but it landed like a brick. She didn't even turn her head, just smirked, a dry little twitch at the corner of her mouth, and said, "You think that would have fixed us?" And there it was, that tone, like she was already bored of the argument that hadn't even started. I stared out the window. Dust devils whipped across the shoulder of the highway. A rusted-out billboard in the distance advertised Lizard Pete's Reptile World 17 miles. The road stretched out forever like it was daring us to keep driving, keep running. I don't know what I expected her to say. Maybe I just wanted to hear her say she thought about it too, that she wondered what a life with more chaos and responsibility and little feet on hardwood floors might have done to us. I wasn't even sure if I wanted kids, not anymore, but I wanted to know if she still wondered, if anything in her head ever reached back toward me. Instead, she turned up the music. Some song with a synth hook and ironic lyrics about heartache. I couldn't make out the words, but I remember feeling like I was being mocked. We didn't talk again until we pulled off at the rest stop. It wasn't even a real stop, just a beat-up parking lot with a crumbling bathroom shack, one graffitied picnic table, and a busted vending machine that looked like it hadn't worked since the Reagan administration. No other cars, no buildings in sight, just hills and dry brush in that vast, unrelenting sky. She turned off the engine but didn't pull the keys, just sat there. "I have to pee," she said. Her voice was clipped, flat. She didn't look at me, just got out and walked toward the building. Her sandals slapped the pavement with that sharp, hollow sound, and for a second I thought about driving off. Not for real, not to leave her, but just far enough to scare her. A taste of her own medicine, see how it felt. But I didn't. I sat there, sweating through my t-shirt, hands limp in my lap. I thought about how she used to reach for my hand when we stopped anywhere, even just for gas. How she used to lean against me when we stood in lines. How the silence we shared used to feel safe. Sacred, even. Now it was a chokehold. Every quiet moment between us felt like a test I didn't know how to pass. When she came back, she didn't get in right away. She stood outside the driver's door, arms crossed over her chest. Her sunglasses were low on her nose, and I could see her eyes, unreadable, distant. "Let's play a game," she said. I blinked. "What?" "Let's see how long it takes." She smiled. It was that cold, amused smile she used to give when she was drunk and mean, which was rare but memorable. "See how long what takes?" I asked. She didn't answer, just opened the door, slid behind the wheel, and shut it. The engine came alive like it had been waiting for her. "Wait," I started, hand on the handle, but she clicked the locks before I could pull. Then she drove. Not fast, not dramatically, no tire squeal or dust cloud, just pulled forward like she was going to merge back onto the highway like this was normal. I stood there stunned. The heat hit me full in the face like stepping into an oven. I watched her tail lights grow smaller, a little red punctuation mark on the sentence of asphalt. She didn't even look back. The air felt thick, the cicadas were loud, too loud, I could hear them in my teeth. My tongue was dry, I touched my pockets, phone dead, wallet still there, no signal out here anyway. No idea how far the next anything was. I sat down on the curb, still half waiting for the joke to finish. Maybe she'd swing back around with a triumphant laugh. Maybe she was trying to teach me something, force me to confront something, my absence, my passivity, my part in the unraveling. But the minutes passed, then the hour, the sun moved, my shirt stuck to my back, a drop of sweat rolled down the inside of my arm like a question mark. The truth came slow like a lake in a dam. This wasn't a prank, this was a message. Oh, she left me. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally. At a rest stop on a back road in the desert with no one around, in a bathroom that smelled like bleach and piss and regret. And the worst part, I wasn't even mad, not yet, just hollow, just tired. I stared out at the horizon and realized this was what the end of something looked like. Not a fight, not a dramatic goodbye, just a moment where one person stands still while the other keeps driving. And all I could think, as the sun beat down and the wind carried the silence like a punishment, was that maybe, just maybe, I deserved it. Maybe this was the only ending we had left. There's a moment after the initial panic fades, after you've checked your pockets 5 times, stared down the empty road until your eyes blur, paced the same stretch of cracked pavement like a rat in a cage, when something inside you goes very, very still. It's not peace, it's something uglier, like a surrender. I sat with my back against the vending machine, legs stretched out in front of me, watching ants crawl in and out of a cigarette butt. I didn't even smoke, but I lit one once in college because I thought it made me look thoughtful. She hated smoking, said it was weak and self-destructive, said everything with a moral edge, even when she was tearing me down in more creative ways. The vending machine buzzed faintly, like it still believed in itself. A faded sticker on the side said ice-cold drinks, but inside it was just a row of dusty cans and the reflection of my own stupid, overheated face. I waited an hour, maybe more. I tried standing out near the edge of the road, waving my arms at the occasional car, but nobody stopped. A minivan full of tourists passed me with wide eyes and faces that screamed, "Do not engage." A pickup truck honked and the guy in the passenger seat yelled something about Jesus and being prepared. I thought maybe I'd hallucinated that part. I walked, there wasn't really a choice. The heat wrapped around me like wet wool, suffocating and scratchy. The asphalt shimmered ahead of me in waves. I could feel the soles of my shoes softening. The road curved slightly, then disappeared behind a low ridge. I had no idea how far the next town was. I didn't care, I just kept walking. Every step was a negotiation with my own body. My knees ached. My mouth went dry so fast I felt like I'd aged a decade in minutes. I thought about drinking from a puddle, but there weren't any, not even a ditch with murky water, just sand, rocks, and scrub. I thought about rattlesnakes, about being found days later, half-eaten by vultures, my bones picked clean under that huge, uncaring sky. I thought about her. Not just her now, the woman who drove off. I thought about every version of her, the girl who cried watching Finding Nemo because the dad reminded her of hers. The woman who for a year straight left notes in my lunch every day, even if we'd fought the night before. The person who held my face and whispered, "I don't think I've ever loved anyone the way I love you," in a dark motel room in Sedona, like it scared her to admit it. And then I thought about all the silences, the walls we built brick by brick with every unspoken resentment, every eye roll, every "I'm fine." I thought about the time I didn't go to her art show because of a meeting, the time she deleted my half-finished manuscript because I'd said the main character wasn't that deep, the way we weaponized each other's softness. Somewhere along that stretch of highway, I stopped hoping she'd come back. When I finally saw the old truck pulled over by the side of the road, I didn't believe it at first. I thought it might be a mirage or worse, some trap. But then I saw him Pete, a guy who looked like he belonged in a country song. Denim shirt, sun-battered skin, thick mustache. He was changing a flat with the kind of calm you only get from doing the same thing 1,000 times. "Hey," I called out, voice rasping. He looked up, didn't flinch, just nodded like this kind of thing happened all the time. "Need a lift?" he asked. I nodded but couldn't even speak. My legs were shaking. He tossed me a bottle of water from his front seat like it was nothing, like I wasn't a man halfway melted on the side of the road. "Sit down before you fall down," he said. Oh, I did. We didn't talk much on the drive. The AC in his truck barely worked, but it was still a relief. The windows were rolled down and the wind whipped through the cab like it was trying to carry the silence away. He had old rock playing low on the radio, Tom Petty, I think, and the desert rolled by in waves of red and gold and brown. He didn't ask where I came from or why I was walking. Just pointed at the horizon and said, "Knife Ridge's about 15 miles that way. Got a decent gas station, little motel, you'll be all right." When we pulled in, the town looked like something from a forgotten postcard. Faded signs, slow-moving people, the smell of oil and dust, and maybe bread baking somewhere far off. I stepped out of the truck and my knees almost gave. "You got somewhere to go?" Pete asked. I opened my mouth, then shut it. "Didn't think so. Gas station's run by a guy named Ray. He's all right. Let you use the phone if you buy a coffee or something." I nodded, "Thanks," I finally said. He tipped an invisible hat and drove off. The phone booth was just outside the station, one of those plastic domes you never think actually works. I called my brother, voicemail, thought about calling her, but my fingers wouldn't move. What was I going to say? "Hey, great prank, you really got me." I cried and almost passed out and might have mild heat stroke. You win. Instead, I went inside. The AC was a miracle. The coffee was terrible. The cashier was maybe 17 and didn't ask why I looked like I'd crawled out of the desert. I bought a pack of peanuts and a Gatorade and sat outside on the curb again, this time in the shade of the ice freezer. A little girl, couldn't have been more than 6, was drawing on the sidewalk with chalk. Her mother was inside. She glanced up at me once, then went back to her masterpiece, a crooked rainbow with 2 smiling stick figures holding hands underneath it. And for a brief second, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, not exactly, but something like gravity, something pulling me back into the world. I didn't know what would happen next. I had no plan, no bags, no idea where I'd sleep that night, but I was here, I was breathing, and I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for her, not for anyone. Just for the next thing, whatever it was. It was 3 days before she reached out. I'd found a room above the auto shop. A mattress on the floor, a fan that clicked like a metronome, and a window that looked out over the back lot where dead cars went to sleep. It cost me $40 a night, cash only, no questions. Ray, the guy at the gas station, said I could clean the storage room in the mornings to cover half the rent. I said yes before I even asked what the job entailed. There was something soothing about sorting broken parts, about knowing where every screw and socket wrench belonged. It made the inside of my head feel less cluttered. I didn't think about her every minute of the day anymore, just every other. I'd wake up in that unfamiliar bed, limbs stiff from the heat, and feel this phantom shape beside me, the absence of her. I'd reach for a phone that wasn't ringing. I'd stare at the ceiling fan until the blades blurred, listening to my thoughts spiral like static. Then the message came, no greeting, no explanation. "Okay, you made your point, you can stop now." At first I laughed. I actually laughed, sharp and bitter, alone in that tiny room with the walls so close I could hear the tenant next door breathing in his sleep. I made a point. Like I'd planned this. Like being left behind in the desert was part of some twisted performance I'd orchestrated to punish her. As if I hadn't been the one covered in dust and shame, stumbling down a sun-choked highway with my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth and her name in my throat like a splinter. I stared at the message for a long time, didn't reply. The next day, the phone rang. Her name, my name, still paired together on the screen like some cruel inside joke. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't mean to. Look, it got out of hand. I was just trying to, I don't know, wake you up or something. You always zone out, you never fight back anymore. I thought if you felt scared for once, you'd actually, Jesus, I don't know. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. That soft, shaky inhale she always did when she was trying not to cry. Call me, please. I listened to the message twice, then 3 times. Each time her voice sounded a little less like hers and a little more like someone I used to know, a fading echo in an empty house. And suddenly I wasn't angry, I wasn't anything. Just tired. I walked. Knife Ridge was the kind of town that forced you to slow down. One main street, a diner that served everything with a side of hash browns, a church with a sign that read Jesus did tap out. People nodded to each other. There were no secrets, just stories repeated often enough to become truth. I found myself at the back of the diner, drinking weak coffee and scribbling in an old notebook someone left behind in the break room. It was filled with unfinished crossword puzzles, oil smudges, and one line scrawled across the back page. People don't change, they just show you who they were all along. I stared at that line until the letters stopped making sense. Was that true? Had I changed, had she? Or had we just gotten better at hiding the parts of ourselves that didn't fit inside the version of our life we were trying to build? We were both so good at pretending. God, we were great at it. Dinner parties with mutual friends, trips with matching Instagram filters, gifts with carefully chosen words that said just enough to appear sincere. But in private, we were ghosts. We moved through rooms without touching. We answered each other's pain with silence. She once told me I was emotionally economical, like I rationed out my love in teaspoons. I told her she was all flair and no follow-through. We both thought we were being clever. I left the diner and walked out to the edge of town, to the hill behind the high school where the radio tower blinked like a heartbeat against the horizon. I lay down in the grass, dry, sharp, unforgiving, and stared up at the sky. I thought about the last real fight we had, not the shouting kind we didn't shout, not often. No, this was one of those deep, surgical fights, the kind that cuts you where you didn't know you could bleed. We were in the kitchen. She said she felt like she lived with a mirror, that all I ever did was reflect her, never confront her, that she didn't know what I wanted, not really. I said, you don't want a partner, you want an audience. She went still like I'd struck her. When maybe I had. Because that was always the wound, wasn't it? She needed to be seen fully, relentlessly, and I was always looking just past her toward something quieter, safer, more manageable. I loved her like a photograph, beautiful, framed, untouchable. Laying there on that hill, staring at the endless, forgiving sky, I asked myself something I never had before. What if she wasn't wrong? What if she left me there not to be cruel, not to punish me, but because she'd run out of ways to make me feel anything? And what if she succeeded? Because I did feel something, not just fear, not just humiliation. I felt awake, and it terrified me. I pulled out my phone, opened her message, opened the voicemail. My thumb hovered over the reply icon. Then I locked the screen. I didn't need to send her anything. There was nothing left to say. No closure, no apology, no final line that would make any of it make sense. We were over, and we'd been over for a long time. The desert just made it visible. That night I sat on the back steps of the auto shop and watched the stars come out, real stars. Not the kind blurred by city lights, but sharp and stubborn and endless. And I knew in that thick, aching quiet that this was the confrontation I'd needed. Not with her, with myself. And I was done waiting for someone else to rescue me from it. I didn't leave Knife Ridge. Not because I loved it, not at first, but because I had nowhere else to be. And somehow that stopped feeling tragic and started feeling like possibility. There's something strange that happens when no one knows you. When you're just the guy who showed up one day, sunburned and quiet, with no story anyone dares to ask for. You become a kind of blank page and people project whatever they want onto you. That used to bother me, the way people make assumptions, but out here it felt like grace. I became the helper at Ray's place. Stocked shelves, cleaned bathrooms, took out the trash. I'd wipe down the counter and listen to the regulars complain about weather or politics or how teenagers didn't know how to change their own oil. No one asked where I came from and I didn't offer. I liked it that way. Pete stopped by every Thursday. We'd sit out back, drinking lukewarm coffee and eating whatever expired snack had been pulled from the shelves that week. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. One day he said, "You look less hollow." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded and passed him a pack of crushed Oreos. I started writing again, not the novel I never finished, not the stories I'd convinced myself were too delicate to show the world. Just little things, observations, fragments. A woman in the diner with trembling hands and perfect eyeliner. A bird trapped inside the gas station for 2 full days before it found the exit on its own. The way my breath slowed when I sat on the hill behind the school and let myself just be. Sometimes I thought about her. Not like before, not as a wound or an obsession. Just as someone I used to know, a person who had changed me, shaped me, scarred me, yes, but I wasn't bleeding anymore, just tracing the lines. Her name would float through my head sometimes, like dust in a shaft of light, and I'd let it settle. I didn't chase it away, and I didn't follow it either. She texted once, maybe a month after I ignored her last message. "I hope you're okay." I read it on the hill with the blinking tower. I stared at the words and felt nothing sharp, no rage, no longing, just a quiet understanding that this was the final echo, the end of the ripple. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because there was nothing I could say that wouldn't pull me backward, and I was done looking behind me. The past was still part of me, stitched into the fabric, stained into the corners, but it didn't own me anymore. Knife Ridge changed with the seasons, if barely. The days got shorter, the mornings cooler. Halloween came and went with paper ghosts taped to shop windows. The local high school put on a parade that consisted of 3 cars, 2 horses, and a kid in a Batman costume throwing candy with ruthless aim. I stood on the curb with a paper cup of cider, watching it all like it belonged to someone else's life. And then, slowly, I realized it was mine. Not the one I thought I'd be living at 40. Not the condo, not the career, not the marriage with matching throw pillows and holiday cards. This life was smaller, stranger, but it was real, and it was mine. I started helping out at the bookstore 2 blocks down. The owner, Mara, was in her 60s, wore floral skirts over jeans, and cursed like a dock worker. She let me reorganize the poetry section and paid me in cash and used paperbacks. I read every night, Neruda, Ocean Vuong, James Baldwin, even the cheesy romance novels she left by the register. Some nights I'd go out to the edge of town with my old notebook and write by flashlight. Not because I had a story to tell yet, I didn't, but because it felt good to fill the pages. To make a mark, to say I was here. There was a woman I started seeing in passing, Annie, I think, worked at the diner. She always wore her hair in a loose braid and had a tired smile that looked like it had survived something. We didn't flirt. We didn't even talk much beyond coffee and pie. But sometimes our eyes would meet for a second longer than necessary, and I'd feel something warm in my chest. Not desire, not yet, just potential. Maybe. And that was enough. I don't think healing is what I thought it was. It's not dramatic. There's no soundtrack, no triumphant montage. It's brushing your teeth twice a day again. It's returning a shopping cart without being reminded. It's watching the light change in the afternoon and not feeling like the world is ending. It's walking past a mirror and not hating what you see, not because you look different, but because you've stopped apologizing for what stayed. Sometimes I still have dreams where she comes back. Not to say sorry, just to exist near me again. In them we never touch. We just sit quietly on opposite sides of a bench or a hotel bed or a broken marriage. And I wake up with that old ache, but it fades faster now. Like all things that stop needing to be held. The other day, a tourist stopped me in front of the station and asked, "You from around here?" I paused, thought about it, then nodded. "Yeah," I said, "I am now." Oh, and I meant it. Not with fanfare, not with pride, but with a kind of quiet certainty that feels a lot like freedom. And as I walked back into the store, sunlight catching the edge of the window and the bell above the door giving that familiar jingle, I felt it settle in me fully, finally. She left me in the middle of nowhere. But I'm not lost anymore.